Today's Daf, Be'ez Hashem, is Daf Pei Daled. And we are holding Daf Pei Gimel Amid Beis about like 5 lines from the bottom. What we are discussing is a statement that was stated in the Mishnah. What was stated in the Mishnah about Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. A guy, I guess, I don't know why a guy wants to do this. He wants to, hold on, Mayor's coming on. Hi, Mayor, we just began. So a guy, this is Daf Pei Daled, a guy wants to show that to his wife, I guess, that he didn't marry her for the money. And therefore, he says to her, I don't want any of the possessions that you brought into the marriage. He says, ainly, I don't want anything that you bring into the marriage. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So much so that even if you die, your family can keep it. That's what. So he's like demonstrating his love for his wife, I guess, and saying, I have no business. This whatever you bring into the marriage, that's yours. Obviously, it's nichsei nilug, that I get a chance to eat. I could benefit from the rental income from the payros while you're alive. When you pass on, they could go back to your family. So technically, that could be good. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says, no, you can't do that. Why? Because in the Chumash, according to Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, it says that a husband inherits his wife. So you can't make a condition that bypasses what the Torah says. The Torah says a husband inherits his wife, and you can't do that. So Amar Rav. So Rav said, halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. The halacha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. V'lo mitamei. But not for the reason. So I agree with Rab Shimon Gamliel in principle that the husband will inherit his wife, no matter what he says, but not for the same reason. So now we have to figure out what Rav meant to say. My halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel v'lo mitame. What did Rav mean when he said that the halacha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, but not according to the reason Rab Shimon ben Gamliel said? Elaim, would you want to say halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel? The halacha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. The Amma imesi Yershena. In practice, if she dies, he automatically inherits her. The lav mitame, but he doesn't agree to the reason Rab Shimon ben Gamliel gave. Why? The ilu Rab Shimon ben Gamliel saw. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel holds masna masha kosa b'Torah t'noi bratel. A person cannot bypass a monetary requirement that the Torah requires you to do. For example, a person cannot say to his wife, "I'm going to marry you, but I'm not going to have to support you." And even if the wife agrees to that, the whole condition is nullified because the Torah says a husband has to support his wife. So therefore, Rab Shimon Gamliel holds you can't say a condition. To his wife, he can't say, when you die, I'm not going to inherit you. You can't say that. That's called making a condition on what the Torah required you. Rav Sava, and Rav will hold Tanai Knaim. Rav will hold that the Tanai Kaim, that you could make a condition against the Torah. How about that? So Rav technically would hold that if a person said to his wife, I want to prove to you that I love you so much that I'm not marrying you for the money, that if you die, I'm not inheriting you. So in theory, Rav would hold that condition would work. So, but why would he end up inheriting his wife anyway? Because Viksava, Rav holds, Yerusha Sabal, the fact that a husband inherits his wife is only D'Rabbanan. It's only D'Rabbanan made it up. Minat Torah, technically, her possessions go back to her family. Midrabbanan, the husband inherits his wife. And therefore, since it's only a din D'Rabbanan, the Chachamim also chizik l'devreim yosim mishal Torah. The Rabbanan made a power to their words more than the Torah, that you cannot never bypass, even in a writer, their conditions that they made that a husband inherits his wife. So that's why Rav, in theory, said that a person, no matter what condition he will take, he will certainly inherit his wife. Now we go to Daf Pei Daled Amud Aleph. So we go to Pei Daled Avav. So now the Gemara wants to know. That means the Sava Rav. So you're trying to say that whenever a premise that a person could make a condition against whatever the Torah says. It's only if something's Drabanan, the Rabbanan says you can't bypass it. But if the Torah makes something a requirement, you could make a rider and bypass it. Like the example that we're giving, if man marries his wife and says, "Oh, we both agree to the condition that I'm not giving you support," that works. So the Gemara says, would Rav hold such a thing works? Can you bypass a obligation of monetary obligation that the Torah requires you? Can you ever bypass it? Rav Tanoi Kayim. Well, Itmar, we learned in a Gemara. Man says to his friend, on condition, I'm selling you an object on the condition that if I fraud you, you cannot cancel the sale. In other words, I don't owe you the fraud money. And the Torah says that if you charge a sixth more than what the item is worth, then you have to pay the guy back the sixth. Even if you made a condition with the buyer that you're not going to abide by the rules of oina, a fraud, their din of a fraud still applies. You can't bypass what the Torah said. You could bypass what the Torah says. But what you see clearly here is Rav says that when it comes to dinim d'oraisa, you can never bypass. So what did Rav mean that the halakha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel? He could even hold like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel for the same reason. That even if it's d'oraisa, you wouldn't be able to bypass what the Torah says, that a husband inherits his father, a husband inherits his wife. Ella, the Gemara says like this. What Rav meant to say is, halakha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, da'ama hamasna amasha kosu b'torah t'noi batlo. If you make a condition against what the Torah said, it's nullified. But v'lav mitamei, not for the same reason that Rab Shimon ben Gamliel says. The ilu Rab Shimon ben Gamliel sava meisi yerishenu. Shimon ben Gamliel holds if you die, she inherits it because Yerusha is d'oraisa. And Rav Sava Mesa, when you die, lo yerishenu, you won't inherit her because the whole inyan of a husband being Yerush his wife is only drabanan. So therefore, Rav will disagree with Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. So the Gemara says, hold it. That's impossible to learn. That's what Rav meant. Rav said that the halacha is Rabbi Gamliel. Whatever conclusion Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel arrived at, I have to agree with that. But what you're saying is he agrees with the reason, but he doesn't paskin like him because he holds Yerusha is only drabanan. But Rav said, I agree with Rab Shimon ben Gamliel that if a person says to his wife that when you die, I don't want to inherit you, you automatically inherit her. So Rav has to agree with that term. Ella, what Rav meant to say is halacha Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Halacha is like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, the Amar who said Imeis Yerushena. If the wife dies, even if he took out a precondition that he's not going to inherit her, Yerushena, he gets the inheritance anyway. But v'lav mitamei, not for the same reason Rab Shimon ben Gamliel said. The Rab Shimon ben Gamliel savar Rab Shimon ben Gamliel holds b'doraisa t'nai batal. If something is doraisa, then if you make a condition against a monetary obligation of the Torah, Tanai Batal, then the condition is nullified. Habad Rabbanim, but if it was a Din Rabbanim, Tanai Kayan, the Tanai would be in effect. Because if a Din Rabbanim, you could make a condition, a rider, that it doesn't apply to you. Rav Sava, Afila de Rabbanan, even if it was just a Rabbanan, Tanai Batal, the Tanai would be nullified. So Rav goes one step further than Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Rav says, first of all, inheritance of a husband to a wife is only din rabbanan. But even if it's a din rabbanan, Rav holds you can't make a condition to bypass that. And different than Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. Shimon says you could, if it was a din rabbanan, you could have made a condition to bypass it. So that's how you square off everything. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Hi ketame ukil who Rav in theory believes in the reason of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel that had it been a deraisa Tanai Batal, and Ukehilchasen he would come to the same conclusion as he. V'Rav Moisafu, and Rav is just adding on something with regards to Din Rabbanan that it would also be Tanai Batal. So again, what did Rav mean that he agrees with Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, but not for the same reason? Okay, and what's the case? A guy says to his wife, I'm not inheriting you. When you die, you can keep the money. You can send it to your family. So that the Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says you inherit her anyway. So what did Rav mean? Rav meant to say like this. Ella, this is the final conclusion. Halacha Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, the Amar. Halacha is like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel that said that if you make a condition with your wife that you're not inheriting her, in Mesa Yerushena, you will inherit her. but not for the same reason. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Sava, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds Yerushas Habal Daraisa. Very important point. A husband inherits his wife is minat Torah, and if the Torah gives you that right to inherit your wife, you can't put a condition in a writer that bypasses that. If you make a condition to bypass what it says in the Torah, the condition falls away. So that's what Rav Shimon Gamliel says. Rav Saba also, Yerushas Abal Drabanan. Rav holds that the fact that a husband inherits his wife is only Drabanan. And really, maybe by a Drabanan, you would say, oh, if it's only Drabanan, maybe you could make a rider and bypass inheriting your wife. No, Rav says, the Chachamim also chizuk l'deverehem kishal Torah. When the Chachamim made a thing, they were so strong in their words that it has a din like a Torah din. And therefore, you cannot bypass that. That's what Rav says. So in the conclusion, Rav is of the opinion that Yerushas Habal is only D'Rabbanan. The fact that a husband inherits his wife is only D'Rabbanan, not like Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, who says it's Minat Torah. And nevertheless, you can't bypass that condition because although it's a din D'Rabbanan, the Rabbanan were very strict that you can never make a prenump, so to speak, to bypass that condition. So now the Gemara asks that a basic question. Rav Sava Yerusha Zabal Rabbanan. Would Rav hold that the husband inherits his wife is only a din Rabbanan? But now we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika says, Hayorish is ishtoi, someone who inherits, let's say, a property belonging to his wife. So the halacha is, let's say you buy a property. Let's say you buy a property, and comes Yovel, you have to return it to the rightful family. The Torah says every heirloom of a property gets returned by Yovel. So the Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika says, if you inherit your wife, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika, if you inherit your wife, yachzil b'nei mishpacha. When it comes Yovel, you have to return it back to her family, but they have to pay you for the price. V'yinakalehem in adamim. But you don't have to. They don't have to pay the full price. They pay a discounted rate, but they have to pay you back, and you return the property back. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said. It's a very mystical statement. Vavinambo, we asked this question, Mike Sova, what does Rabbi Yochanan hold? Ik Sova Yerushas Abal Daraisa. If Rabbi Yochanan holds that Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika holds that the husband inherits his wife is Minat Torah, Sama Yachzer, why should he have to return it by Yovel? It totally belongs to him. His wife died. It belongs to the husband. What are you making him return it for? Be Drabanam. If it's only Drabanam, Damim my Avedatayu. Why are they paying him for it? It rightfully belongs back to the family because he's not really supposed to inherit it midaraisa. He only inherits it midrabanan. So really, it always belongs to the family. So when it comes yovel, you have to give it back to the family, like any purchase that you make. You have to give it back by yovel to the family. So Rabbi Yochanan, so Rav explained Rabbi Yochanan's words. Rav says lo'ilam ksavi Yerushas Abal Daraisa. Rabbi Yochanan holds Yerushas Abal is the Raisa. So what's the scenario over here? So why do you have to return it? You inherited from your wife a cemetery plot, not just a cemetery plot, like a family plot, plots, a bunch of places where you can bury a family. That was what he inherited from his wife. Now, really, he could keep it. Why shouldn't he keep it? Because Yerushas Abal is the Raisa. He's allowed to keep it. But Chachamim made that you're required to give it back to the family. Because it's an insult to the wife's family. The Rabbanan said that you should return it to the wife's family, but you could charge them for it. Lishkal demei v'li hader. They have to pay money, and you have to return it because it would be insult. They have to find another cemetery plot to bury themselves. They want to be buried next to family, and now this plot is going to be filled up with the husband's family. So therefore, you're required to give it back to that family because of pagam mishpacha. And what does it mean that you have to give them a discounted rate? To make keva ishta. You don't have to charge them for the fact that you buried your wife there. Because the burial spot that you paid for your wife, you don't charge them for that because the requirement for a husband to bury his wife. So they don't pay for that spot. But you do have to sell it back to them. And we find that Pagam Mishpacha is a real thing, that we take in effect how the family is going to feel about something being transferred. The Tanya we learned to the Bright. So Hamacha Kivrei, guy is cheap. His family gave him a burial spot. let's say the Queen of England. She has a known space where they're going to be buried, and she sold it. The derech kivrei, or the pathway leading up to his grave. The place where they stand and on their way to bury him, and they say Shvu Menachem. There was a whole series what we learned in Masechta Brachos, Mokom Espedei, or a special spot that was reserved where they're going to eulogize him. All this was pre-planned, and the guy sold it because he needed the money. So when he comes to his death, they could go against the will of the guy and bury him there. Because it's an insult of the family if you would take him and bury him somewhere else. But we do see that we take insult of the family. But what's the bottom line of this whole thing? Rav explained Rabbi Yochanan that holds Yerushas Baal Daraisa, that the husband inherits his wife Minat Torah. And you just got through saying that Rav holds Yerushas Baal is only Drabanan. Answers the Gemara, right? Rav the Tameh, Rav of the Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereika Kama. Here Rav is just explaining what Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereika holds. The lay svirale, but Rav himself doesn't hold of that. Rav holds that Yerushas Baal is only a din d'Rabbanan, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereika holds Yerushas Baal d'Oraisa. Rav just is explaining how Rabbi Yochanan ben Bereika made his statement. What case was he referring to? New Mishnah. Mishames. Now we know. Okay, Mishames. A guy died. Now we know that. Let's say when a guy dies, the way it works is when a guy dies and he has obligations. So let's say he left over a watch, a cufflinks. So those movable items, you can't, the creditors have no rights to them because metaltale diyasme, movable items belonging to the orphans, are not liened to an old creditor. So look at this case. Mishames. A guy died. V'niach isha. He owes his wife a ksuba. Ubal choiv, and he owed somebody else money. And he has yorshim and the orphans. Now, the question is like this. He had a deposited item by somebody. Let's say he had a watch by somebody's watching his Rolex. Or somebody else owed him money. So really, this thing is not yet collected by the Yorshim. So therefore, who gets the rights to grab this pikodon that he has not in the possession of the inheritors? You give it to the weaker person. So you give it, maybe let's say we'll see what it means, but let's say it means you give it to the woman. The woman has a right to collect. We're going according to the opinion that a woman could collect her ksuba from a metaltalin. So if she goes to wherever the pikodon is, or to that person who owed her husband money and collects that money, they can give it to her, and that's in liu of her ksuba. So because maybe this guy has no other way, there will be another other way for these people to collect their debt. Rabbi Kiva says no. Ein marachem in bedin. We have no rachmanis when it comes to din. In other words, we have to give it. Who really does it belong to? Elinos l'yoshim. This thing belongs to the inheritors. Why? Because it belongs to the inheritors. It's almost the guy left cufflinks in his drawer. No one could collect that because it's already in the possessions of the inheritors, of the orphans. So same thing over there. Even though it's not technically in their possessions, we consider it as if the Yoshim have it, even though it's by a shomer or somewhere else. It's deposited somewhere else. Because why? Shekul and Tzrich and Shavua. All other collectors, like the Isha, the woman, or the Balchoiv, if they want to collect from Yisraelim, is a two-step process. First, they have to make their claim, and they have to swear that they didn't collect it. They are Yoshim, Tzrich, and Shavua. But the Yoshim, if they're an orphan, they could walk to the Baal Pikodon and say, "Hey, I'm an inheritor. Give me my father's stuff." So therefore, it's already considered in their possessions, and therefore it cannot be touched by the Baal Choiv or the Isha. It cannot be touched. And it gives you another case. Let's say he left fruits in the field. Like a bag of fruits in the field, all right? But the Gemara is going to say let's say in the Rishus Rabin. So it's not in the hands of the Yorshim yet. It's not in their house. He left the father died and left a bag of fruits somewhere in a public domain. Whoever grabs it first, whether it's the Yorshim or whether it's the Malva, whether it's the Malva or whether it's the Isha, Whoever gets it first is the lucky one. Let's say the woman grabbed it and there's leftover. Let's say her kasuba was 200 and she grabbed 400. So then what do you do with the extra? Let's say the Baal Choiv grabbed more than what he was supposed to, more than his debt. The extra, it's an odd word, but you give it to the weaker one. You give it to one of them, either the Malva or the Baal Choiv. You give it to somebody who has the weakest claim, so to speak. We want to make them feel good. Rab Kiva oime ein meracham in bedim. We have no rachmanis in din. Ella yinosnu liyarshim. If the man left a bag of fruits out there in the public domain and it really belonged to him, you have to give it to the orphans, and that's it. Nobody else can grab it and take it for their outstanding debt. Shekulam tzrichin shvua. Every outstanding creditor, when it comes to collecting a debt from orphans, it's a two-step process. They have to claim and they have to make a shvua. But somebody who an orphan, when he's trying to collect, he doesn't need a shvua, and therefore it's almost considered, even though it's not in their house yet, it's almost considered in the hands of the Yorshim, and therefore nobody, according to Rabbi Akiva, no creditor can take it. Now, the Gemishna gave you two cases of where it's possible to have a movable item not in the deceased man's house. It's either was a pikadon, it was deposited somebody who's watching it, right? Or it was a milva, or he loaned out money to somebody, and the guy he lent him $1,000, and the guy spent the money. Now he's ready to pay back. So Rabbi Tarfon says whoever comes can get it. Rabbi Kiva says no, you have to give it to the Yarshim. So the Gemara says like this: Lama lila misnim milva. Why did you give me a case of a loan? Lama lila misna pikadon. Why did you give me a case of a deposit item? I mean, you give me two cases of where you have a machlokes between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon, in where there's a movable item belonging to the deceased person, but it's not in his house; it's somewhere else. So you gave two examples. One, he loaned somebody money, and two, he deposited somebody an item with somebody to watch. Tzricha. I need those two cases. Ti'itana milva. If I would say that it was a loan, so I would say Bahal Komer Rab Tarfon. That Rab Tarfon says that any other creditor can collect it, and it's not necessarily belonging to the Yorshim. Why? Mishum de milva lahitzah nitnu. Most loans are supposed to be spent, and therefore it's the item that the man gave before he died for the loan is not here, and therefore it's not considered as if the orphans collected it already. And for this reason, Rab Tarfon said that any other creditor who's lucky enough to collect it can go to that person and collect his debt. Because of the Isabani, if he deposited an object for somebody else to watch, right? So the items is here in the world. So maybe Rab Tarfon would agree with Rab Kiva that no, it belongs to the Yorshim. It's just not in the Yorshim's house. It happens to be at a watchmaker. But maybe Rabbi Tarfon would agree that you don't give it to any other creditor. You have to give it to the Yorshim. So that's why it said the case of Pikadon. If we just say the case of Pikadon, I would say Rabbi Kiva. In that case, Rabbi Kiva says you give it to the Yorshim because it's here. Maybe by a loan, maybe that's why he would agree to Rab Tarfon that any creditor can collect it if it was just a loan outstanding. Tzricha, that's why you need both cases. Okay, now the Mishnah said that Rab Tarfon said that if it's a watch or if it's a pikadon or a loan outstanding and it's not in the Yorshim's possession, Rab Tarfon said you give it to the weakest creditor. Who is the weakest creditor? Basically, a person has two creditors. Either it's his wife, he owes the ksuba, or he owes somebody money. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina Amar lekoshel shebera'aya. The one that has the latest, the one that he borrowed money the last. Because the one he borrowed money the last has most likely the weakest claim because he can't claim on properties that were sold prior to the loan. So therefore, he's considered like the weakest creditor. And Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina explained, Rab Tarfon to mean you give it to the weakest creditor who has the latest loan document. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you give it l'ksubas isha to the woman, because it's hard for a woman to go around to try to find where she can collect her ksuba money. She doesn't know how to do the proper due diligence to figure out where her husband hid money. And mishum china. And we want women to agree to getting married to men. If they're going to know that there's a chance that they won't collect ksuba money and they'll be starving the rest of their life. So most women are not going to agree to marriage. So that's a social reason why we want to always try to settle the ksubas isha first. Kitanoi, it's machlekes tanoim. Binyamin Oimer, Rabbi Yamin says, la koisha shabriya, who kosher, that makes sense. Rabbi Laza Oimer, la ksubas isha shimchina. Rabbi Laza said, like Rabbi Yochanan said, you give it to the ksuba because we want women to want to get married to men, and therefore we make it easy for them to collect ksuba. So that's that. Heniach peres telusha. The Mishnah said a case of if he left over empty a bag of fruits. So the Mishnah said that if, let's say, the ksuba, the woman grabbed it and there's something left over, then you give it to Rabbi Tarfon said you give it to any of the creditors, the weakest creditor. Rabbi Kiva says no, you give it to the Yarshim. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Kiva, my iri moisa. Does the Mishnah say that only if there was leftovers, then you give it to the Yarshim? Kulanama the Yarshim Hava. Rabbi Kiva holds that everything belongs to the Yarshim. So what does it mean that you have to give it to the Yarshim, the leftovers? The whole thing was not supposed to be grabbed by the woman. Einachanami. Right, the truth is right. The whole thing has to be returned. So now that Rab Tarfon said moiser, that the extra goes back, that you could do to the weakest person. So Rabbi Kiva was latching on to Rab Tarfon's case. But again, Rabbi Kiva holds that you cannot grab. Let's go to Peidal on base. So let's just recap. We have a fantastic makloiches between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Kiva. What happens when a person dies and has creditors, and the items, the movable items, metaltalim, are not in the house where he died? It's actually outside the house. Either it's a pikadon by somewhere else, or it's a loan. Rabbi Tarfon says anybody could grab it. The one that you give it to is the one that has let's say, according to what we learned so far, according to one opinion, you give it to the woman, to the ksuba isha. Rabbi Kiva says no, it belongs to the yarshim. Like every metaltalim, every movable item, it cannot be claimed by a creditor. The only thing, if someone is a creditor, he can only collect karka, not metaltalim. So, frag the Gemara, Rab Kiva, according to Rab Kiva, tvisa loy mahanya klal, does tvisa not work at all? Grabbing? I mean, we find that if a person's around and he owes money and he's not paying, Bezdin will actually go into his house and grab something, even, go into his closet and take the fancy coat that he has there. So there is a concept of tfisa, of grabbing something. Somebody owes you money, he's not paying you, and he has it, you're allowed to grab it. Amarav Nachman, certainly Rabbi Kiva agrees with that. Who should tafas mechayim? But you have to grab that when he's alive. You call the marshal when he's alive, and then you can grab it. But if you didn't grab it when he's alive, and then he died, that's that we have a rule: metaltalim de yasmi are not claimed by a creditor. Say the Gemara. Now the Mishnah said that if it was apples, let's say, so then Rab Tarfon says since it's not in the house of the deceased person, so then doesn't belong to the Yarshim. So the Gemara said, Rab Tarfon de manchahecha, where were these apples located? These fruits that were not connected to the ground. Rav Shmuel Damrei Tevayev Hu Shutzuvorim Monachim Rishus Rabim. And it was in the Rishus Rabim. It was in the public domain. But Rav Shmuel said if it was located in a simta was like an alleyway off the public domain where people would meet to have a private conversation with somebody they wanted to do a transaction. So it's somehow connected to the public highway, but it's not on the public highway. If the fruits were located there, then Rav Tarfon would agree that it's not like that it belongs to the Yarshim. Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish, Damri Tavaya, Rabbi Yochanan and Shlokish both hold afilu besimta, even if it was in this alleyway, as long as it was not in the Yarshim's house. If these fruits were somehow off the public domain in a private alleyway, in a public semi-private alleyway, still it's not considered the Yarshims. And Rab Tarfon would say that what? That it's not the Yarshims, and whoever you give it to the Kaishal, the weakest person of the creditors. Now the Gemara just says a couple of stories. During the Yonik Rab Tarfon, they paskin like Rab Tarfon. Again, the man had a bunch of creditors when he died, and they gave the money, let's say, to the ksuba. So that was a group of dayanim paskin like Rab Tarfon. V'hadrei l'shlokish la'ovdim minei. And Rab Shlokish turned over and overturned their psak. And he said, "You paskin wrong. We don't paskin like Rab Tarfon. We paskin like Rabbi Akiva. It all belongs to the Yarsha." Amalei Rabbi Yochanan Shechin asked Rab Shlokish, "Asisa kishal Torah? You making Rabbi Akiva's words like it's Torah? Even if they paskin wrong, it's only Rab Tarfon is a big tzaddik. You can paskin big koisik. You can paskin like Rab Tarfon, and just because it's a mistake, still still considered to be a good psak." So Rabbi Yochanan was upset that Rab Shlokish overturned that psak of that dayanim that paskin like Rab Tarfon. So maybe they're arguing like this. The Marsova, the one holds Tabadva Mishnah Chayza. Rav Shlokish holds that it's always obvious you're always paskin like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the number one Tana you always paskin. And if you make such an obvious mistake, if a Bezdin makes such an obvious mistake, Chayzer, their psak is overturned. Marsova, but Rabbi Yochanan holds Tabadva Mishnah, you make such an obvious mistake, Eino Chayzer, you don't overturn the psak. So that was the machlekes. So the Gemara wants to suggest that. The Gemara says, "Look, not so. If you make an obvious mistake that was something that's written in the Mishnah, you would overturn it." So then why Rabbi Yochanan was upset with Rish Lakish that he wanted to overturn the psak? Even if you're supposed to paskin like Rabbi Akiva, but they paskin like Rab Tarfon. Marsava halachi Rab Akiva mechavev loy merabai. Umarsava afilu merabai. Halachi v'rabbi. Rish Lakish held that you always paskin like Rabbi Akiva. The halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yochanan held that the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, true, but not against his Rebbe. And since Rab Tarfon was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva, we should paskin like Rab Tarfon. That's why Rabbi Yochanan held that Rabbi Akiva is wrong. You don't paskin like Rabbi Akiva. But Rish Lakish held no. You always paskin like Rabbi Akiva, even if he argued against Rab Tarfon, who was his Rebbe. And therefore, halacha is always like Rabbi Akiva, and this is considered a Torah b'dvar Mishnah. You're making a big mistake, and therefore Rish Lakish wanted to overrule the psak. The Ibai if you want, I can tell you. The Kuliyama halacha Rabbi Akiva mechaveiroi v'lei merabai. The halacha is like Rabbi Akiva against his friends, and not against his Rebbe. When Rabbi Akiva argues against his own personal rabbi, then we wouldn't paskin like Rabbi Akiva, we'd paskin like the rabbi. This is the argument. Marsava Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Havit. Rabbi Yochanan holds Rabbi Tarfon was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. So it's good to paskin like Rabbi Tarfon. Marsava, but Rish Lakish holds Chaveira Hava. Rabbi Tarfon was only his colleague, but not his rabbi. And therefore you should have paskin like Rabbi Akiva. If you want, I can tell you another shot. The Kuliyama Chaveira. Everybody agrees that Rab Tarfon is the colleague of Rabbi Akiva. But this is the argument. Mar Sover Rish Lakish holds halacha itmar. You always have to do the halacha like Rabbi Akiva, and you can't say it any other way. And therefore, Rish Lakish overruled the whole psak. Marsava maten itmar, and Marsava that one holds that maten itmar means that you bend the halacha to Rabbi Akiva, but if you paskin like Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Yochanan held it's also okay. So Rabbi Yochanan didn't agree that you overrule the psak if you paskin like Rabbi Tarfon. New Gemara. Krevid Rabbi Yochanan, Tfas Parsa Yasmim Sinta. They had relatives of Rabbi Yochanan. They were owed money by this guy that died. So what did they do? They grabbed his cow that belonged to the Yisayim, and this cow was in the Sinta, which was in the side alleyway. So they wanted to collect the debt from the guy that died, but they were relatives with Rabbi Yochanan, who was the great rabbi. Also the comment of Rabbi Yochanan, they went to Rabbi Yochanan, their relative, and Amalahu, so he said, Shapir Tafstu, it's good that you grabbed it. The guy owed you money, and he has a cow wandering in the street. It's a movable item. grab it. So you get yourself paid back. Also, the common Lakish, but they weren't sure that they should listen to their uncle or whatever, their relative. So they went to Rosh Lakish and asked him, did we do the right thing of grabbing this cow that belonged to the Yisraelim, but it wasn't in the Yisraelim's possessions? Amalahu zil ahoder. Rosh Lakish says, give it back. Also, the comment because the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, that you cannot grab. A creditor cannot grab. It always belongs to the Yisraelim. Also, the comment of Rabbi Yochanan, Amalahu ma'asa. They came back to Rabbi Yochanan and said, "Oh, Rav Shlokish told us to give it back." So Rabbi Yochanan said, "What can I do? Rav Shlokish sheknegdi chalakalai. He's as smart as me, and therefore you have to listen to Rav Shlokish. If he tells you to give it back, that's it. That's how you have to go." Two more stories. Ahu bakara the asmin the tafsi Torah minei. That means that there was a herdsman who was watching somebody's ox, and the guy died. And the Yisraelim now belongs to the orphans. So, but the one Baal Chayiv came to the herdsman and grabbed the ox that he's trying to collect the debt. So again, it's not in the possession of the Yisraelim yet. It's not in their house. It's out there by a herdsman. So it's like a pikadon. So Baal Chayiv says, "Michaim tefisnalei." I grabbed the ox when I was alive, and therefore I'm not subject to the Mishnah. You grabbed it after the man died, and therefore, if we paskin like Rabbi Kiva, you weren't allowed to grab it. Also, the Kamei to Rab Nachman, so they came to Rab Nachman. He said, "Do you have witnesses that he told the herdsman or to the Yisraelim? Do you have witnesses that he grabbed it?" So the herdsman said, "Amalei lav. I don't have witnesses that he stole it. I mean, I know that this ox is now in this guy's possession, and really, I was the one that was watching it. And probably he didn't do a good job watching it. So Rab Nachman said that the guy could keep it. He could have said, I bought it. He didn't have to say that I grabbed it in the middle of the night when you weren't looking to collect the debt. He could have said, I bought it. The owner sold it to me. So because he could have said that, he could say that I grabbed this as a payment of the debt while the guy was alive, and I'm not subject to the machlokes or Rabbi Kiva and Rab Tafin. So the Gemara says, just because an animal is by you doesn't prove it's yours. Certain like jumpy animals that move around on their own, there is no chazaka. It means you can't say that just because it's in your backyard, it's yours. For example, if you go upstate and you find a deer in your backyard, well, the deers jump around from place to place. So just because it's by you doesn't mean it's yours. So how could the guy said that I bought it when it's an animal? Maybe the animal walked there by himself. So it wouldn't prove that it's his, that he could have said, he doesn't have a chazaka, an assumption that it really belongs to him. And says the Gemara, Shana Torah de Mesira L'Roya. Oxen are different than, like a cow, like sheep and deer. Sheep and deer require herdsmen. We can move around from place to place on their own, but oxes are always given over to a herdsman to watch it. And therefore, if it actually turned up in this guy's property, he could have said it was mine all along, and we would believe him. So, because the oxes don't move around as much as a sheep or a deer or something like that, and therefore it would be a good chazaka. One last point: the Beit Nasiya, the house of the Nasi, the president of the Jewish people that lived in Basel, and they were owed money. So Tafsa Amsa the Yasmin Besimta, they owed money. The guy died, so they grabbed a maid that was walking in the alley, the public alley, and they said, "Now the guy that died owed us money. Now you becoming our maid." So that was nice. So basically, they paskin like Rab Tarfin. If you grab it, it's good. You don't have to give it to the Yarshan. Yosef, Rab Bo, Rab Chanin, Rab Papi, Rab Yitzchak, Napcha. All these Amoraim was sitting. Yosef, Rab Abba Gabay. Rab Abba was sitting amongst them. So all these Tanoim, Amalahu, they said to the Beit Nasiya, the president, Shapet Tafsisu. You did a good idea. Grab it. It's yours. The person owed you money. You grabbed his maid. That's fine. Amalu Rab Abba. So Rab Abba said to the other Amaroyim, you're wrong. Because he's the president, you want to flatter him by saying that the paskin like Rab Tarfin, but it's not true. For doin dayanik Rab Tarfin, yes, the dayanim paskin like Rab Tarfin, but bahadre Shlokish uvdiminai Rav Shlokish overturned that psak because Rav Shlokish held that the real psak is like Rabbi Akiva, that everything belongs to the Yisayim. Okay, so that end paid the law. I just want to say that even with if someone owes if the guy is owed money, nowadays we do say that metaltalim that movable items are subject to being grabbed by somebody that owes you, even if they belongs to the assignment. That's what I think. Metaltalim the yasmin are meshubed to a debt. You have to look that up in the psak.
Sure, thank you.